Test pilot Tuck Pendleton wants to make history. Supermarket clerk Jack Putter needs a vacation.
Late. That's not good. You know it's coupon day.
Lieutenant Pendleton is about to be miniaturized, placed into this needle, and then injected into this rabbit. But something went wrong. And Tuck's about to get a new destination. Inside Jack Putter.
I'm not a man.
Somebody help me! I'm possessed!
Jack's got twice the problems. But he's double the man.
Bring your knee up right now! Can you more count? See that?
With Tuck on his side. And only 24 hours left for Jack to get out of danger, so that Tuck can get out of Jack. If incredible adventure is in your blood,
don't do anything weird in there, okay?
Take a trip you'll never forget. InnerSpace.
The first week of July 1987 saw InnerSpace arrive on the big screen. Directed by Joe Dante, who had great success with Gremlins in 1984. Producer Peter Gruber was developing InnerSpace, a film about an explorer who is miniaturized and sent into another man's body. He hired a young writer to create a script for the story. Director Joe Dante thought the story was too much like Fantastic Voyage and didn't want to direct it. Gruber took the idea to Warner Brothers with executive producer Bruce Berman. Director John Carpenter was briefly attached to the project. Warner Brothers asked Jeffrey Boehm to rewrite the script, but he initially refused. Carpenter convinced Jeffrey there was a good story to tell, and he wrote a draft. The writer said, "I took the premise and basically invented everything else." Eventually Carpenter left the project to direct Big Trouble in Little China, and Dante joined as director. Dante said that Jeffrey's screenplay was a wonderful script, completely the opposite of the first. It was imaginative, funny and clever. Dante was pleased that the new script was not a rip-off of Fantastic Voyage. He said that although both Jeffrey and the original writer share writing credit for the film, it was Jeffrey who really wrote the picture. The script was given to Steven Spielberg, who liked it so much he agreed to produce it. Jeffrey Boehm later went on to provide his writing skills on The Last Crusade. The film's budget hasn't been revealed, but it only made about $20 million domestically in the USA. Not entirely sure what it made worldwide, but unfortunately the film failed to gain much of a profit. Joe Dante hasn't had much luck with box office success. The Gremlin films are the exception. I've seen many of his flicks and they've all been very impressive, aside from Small Soldiers, which I saw when it came out, which I thought was very weak, but that was mostly down to its story and me being naive and thinking it would be like Gremlins. The casting is spot on in this film. Dennis Quaid plays a cocky Lieutenant Pendleton effortlessly, and his comedy timing is perfect. Martin Short was already famous in the comedy circuit for his work on Saturday Night Live, and showed up in the comedy film The Three Amigos, but in this he is the main star, and does a splendid job playing the hypochondriac Jack Putter. Meg Ryan is okay in this movie. I've never really been a big fan of her work. Her and Dennis Quaid got together on this picture, and married a few years later. You have a couple of actors who make regular appearances in Joe Dante films, either cameos or a supporting character, such as Robert Picardo, who many will probably know from Star Trek, plays the cowboy. He impressed me the most in this film. He perfectly copies Martin Short's mannerisms when Tuck replicates the cowboy's face. John Hora, who had previously worked as Joe Dante's cinematographer on all of his movies, was cast as Ozzy after Steven Spielberg suggested him to play the absent-minded professor. Director Dante and the producer were very skeptical about the idea, and Spielberg apparently insisted that they give him a screen test. The director and producer were impressed with his performance. Down on his luck, Naval Aviator Lieutenant Tuck Pendleton resigns his commission and volunteers for a secret miniaturization experiment. He is placed in a submersible pod, and he and the pod are shrunk to microscopic size. They are transferred into a syringe to be injected into a rabbit, but the lab is attacked by a rival and criminal organisation led by renegade scientist Dr. Margaret Kanker. Planning to seize the experiment and steal their technology, the experiment supervisor Ozzy Wexler, knowing their intentions, escapes with the syringe. A chase ensues with one of Margaret's henchmen to a nearby shopping mall. After being fatally shot and knowing he is about to die, he injects Pendleton and the pod into an unsuspecting Jack Putter, a hypochondriac grocery store clerk, who happens to be the first person he comes into contact with. On awakening from unconsciousness, Tuck is unaware of what has happened and believes he has been injected into the rabbit. It's only when all attempts to radio the lab are unsuccessful that he navigates to the pod into the optical nerve and implants a camera so he is able to see what the host is seeing. This is when he realises he is inside a human. In an effort to make contact, Tuck attaches another device, but this time in Jack's inner ear, enabling him to talk to Jack initially with embarrassing and hilarious consequences. Tuck explains that the pod only has a few hours supply of oxygen and needs help in order to extract him by going back to the lab. At the lab, the scientists explain to Tuck and Jack that the other group wants to sell the miniaturization technology for use in espionage. In the raid on the lab, they stole one of 2 computer chips that are vital to the process. The group's mastermind is Victor Scrimshaw, and his main henchmen are the cowboy, Mr. Igo, and Margaret, his scientific supervisor. By contacting Tuck's estranged girlfriend, Lydia Maxwell, who has had dealings with the cowboy, they learn that the cowboy plans to buy the second computer chip from Scrimshaw. After knocking the cowboy unconscious using the pod's equipment, Tuck controls the muscles of Jack's face to make him look like the cowboy, and with him posing as the cowboy, they meet with Scrimshaw and steal the computer chip from him. The visual effects in InnerSpace are quite frankly amazing, and for a long time I didn't know how they managed to achieve a lot of it. The effects were supervised by industry legend Dennis Muren, who later went on to supervise the effects on Terminator 2, Jurassic Park and the Star Wars films. He achieved over 90% of it within miniature form, everything done within camera. They used lots of camera tricks and different types of camera speeds to give the weight to Tuck's pod. Simple things were used for creating fat sails like balloons. Rob Bottin provided the visual makeup effects, and they are very inventive and cleverly implemented into the film. They used a similar effect in Total Recall a couple of years later. They were very clever in how they achieved many of the shots. They won an Oscar for their efforts, and definitely deserved it. The soundtrack was provided by Jerry Goldsmith, who frequently worked with director Joe Dante. The score isn't instantly recognisable in comparison to some of his other scores, but if you listen to the score while watching the movie or by itself, you can hear many familiar action cues or setups that he used in other movies such as First Blood, and later he uses to great effect in Total Recall. To be honest, this soundtrack is like a best of. It combines all of Jerry's best work and mashes it all into one to create a great soundtrack. There were many pop songs featured throughout the film. The tune that is played most often is Twisting the Night Away by Rod Stewart. Other artists were featured throughout the movie's soundtrack, mostly during the club sequence: Wang Chung, Berlin and Narada, Michael Walden. The Pet Shop Boys were going to be featured on the album, but the band or the producers felt that the song that was chosen wasn't glossy enough, so they decided to leave it out. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert both really enjoyed InnerSpace, but they did feel it dragged out for a bit too long and could have been trimmed for pacing.
InnerSpace is very ambitious. You can see all the things that are going on with a love story, the 2 guys, the plot of the high-tech thieves. So much is going on at times it actually wore me out with some of its special effects and all the story twists and turns. And yet, I admired the various performances. I was amazed by some of the humor and the effects going on inside Martin Short's body. Short is really all funny by himself. He doesn't need that many special effects. So I basically liked InnerSpace. I just wish it had been edited a little tighter. I wanted the story not to belabor itself.
I also felt the story ran on just a little bit too long. It could have been tightened up a lot, but boy, there is a lot in this movie.
Yes.
And the special effects were interesting because they used, it looked to me like, actual photography of inside real human bodies. Those scenes where he's being dragged down into the valve of the heart there, I mean, it was almost like Michael DeBakey should have been the cinematographer for that one. And the whole plot is fun because Martin Short is fun as the guy on the outside. Dennis Quaid is charming. He's got a great personality, but he sits in the capsule the whole time. Short, who really didn't realize his potential in Three Amigos, is really good this time. This is the first movie where I think he could be a movie star.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you wait when there's a big talent on a show like Saturday Night Live, you wait for the movie. Eddie Murphy got lucky, hit it right away with 48 Hours. Now Martin Short has his picture, and it's called InnerSpace. It's that good.
InnerSpace is a movie that is often forgotten about. Many of my friends have seen it and all loved it, and I don't think I've ever met anyone who disliked the movie. If you check reviews online, they are all very positive. But why is it a movie that people seem to forget about? It's very funny, it has great performances, and the visual effects are highly impressive. As Siskel and Ebert said, it was a little dragged out in areas and should have been tightened, because the movie clocks in at around 2 hours long, which I agree with, but that's only a minor gripe. InnerSpace isn't extremely rewatchable. I watch it every couple of years. I don't want people to think that it's a negative thing, because InnerSpace is very memorable, so you don't feel drawn to watch it on a frequent basis. It stays fresh in your mind. Go out and get it on DVD. If you don't own it, you will not be disappointed. It will keep you smiling and laughing throughout.
Jack, it worked. You just digested the bad guy.
Just relax, Jack.
Ah! I'm blind! Ah, I'm God! Okay, buddy boy, here we go.
Electrical system overload.
Stop it! How you doing, Jimmy?
Don't do anything weird in there, okay?
Take a trip you'll never forget. InnerSpace.